Thank you for joining us for another episode of Visionary Buildings podcast and web series. We're joined today by Ivy Seraphim. She is a longtime friend, but also a clinical social worker. And we're here to talk about the area of life emotions and how to sort of navigate them in your career and your personal life. Yes. I'd love to start with the question because we work with Celeste Gehring, who is running Visionary Building, working to help women navigate their careers and things like that. I'd love to sort of hear what a visionary means to you.
A visionary to me is somebody who has taken, I guess, the time, energy, and effort to create to have a very intentional way of moving through the world, and in terms of like the way they create a life for themselves, the way they sort of build out how they see the world and what gives them purpose, as well as the way that they interact with other people.
I love that. So I'd love to start with, because we're focusing on the area of emotions today, and you work you work very closely with emotions on a regular basis. I'd love to sort of hear, because you mentioned sometimes that your work can get pretty heavy, how you sort of balance separating your work from your personal emotional life.
It's a good question, Sarah. Especially because I work from home and will live in the same place that I'm also working and talking about heavy subjects. I find it helpful to be able to create like different structure and routines around that. So it's things like making sure that I get outside every single day to just simply leave my apartment. It can be making sure that I do different things to be able to move my body. So I enjoy yoga, walks, things like that. It's also making sure that I spend time with people I love who are also able to provide me with support if I've had a particularly hard day. So people like my husband, people like your sister, just being able to use the people that I know and who love me as support. I also love just doing hobbies and things like that. So that can be reading books, that can be seeing Broadway shows, that can be traveling. So just being able to, I love what I do, but I also love the life that I've built outside of my job as well. And when things are hard at work, it helps to be able to focus on building out a life that I enjoy outside of work.
Really, it seems like you've got it down, a good routine. I love that. Because your job is sort of to be emotionally present for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the challenges that come with that, and how have you had to navigate that throughout your career?
So therapists, social workers, anybody who works in the mental health profession, we talk a lot about transference and countertransference. So that can be thinking about if the client is saying something in session and you notice that it's bringing up something for you, whether that's connected to something you're going on in your personal life, it reminds you of a friend or family member, or it's even talking about like what is going on in the world, being able to sort of note what feeling is coming up for you in that moment when you're sitting there with the client, and having to take the time to process that outside of session, whether that's with your own therapist, with your supervisor, with other therapists. That is usually the biggest thing that you have to keep in mind when you're working with folks who are experiencing intense emotions, is that you also you have to learn about what is going to come up for you. And sometimes it's unexpected, sometimes it's predictable. But having to make sure that you have the space to also process your own feelings while you're helping somebody else process is really important.
So Celeste is a mentor to people in sort of multiple different industries and things like that.
Mm,
I know this question comes up a lot for her, and I've heard it as well. What advice do you have for people to sort of be in the right headspace in a work environment, in a stressful work environment,
mm.
how to not bring it home with them?
I talk about this a lot with a lot of my clients, um, especially because I work in New York City and I work with a lot of folks who are professionals in New York City. I think a lot about boundary setting. So that's one of them. So if you're going into an office and you're working the whole day, like, are you taking your 30 minutes or hour break for lunch? Are you literally leaving your desk to go eat lunch and go read a book, listen to a podcast, literally anything that doesn't involve work, talk to your mom? Um, at the end of the day, are you leaving when you're supposed to leave, or are you staying later? If you're working from home or you do like hybrid work, are you um, checking your email like on your phone in bed before going to sleep? How does that make you feel if you're checking your email or your work email before bed? I think, especially because of the fact that a lot of us work either remotely, do the hybrid approach, going into the office some days, working from home from others, you have to be very intentional about what kind of boundaries you set with work, because it can be easy to have that bleed over. And if you notice that you're feeling more anxious or feeling more irritated or feeling more moody because work is feeling like it's taking over your life, it's helpful to take a step back and think about what are the like small tangible things that I can do that might make a difference over time. So that way work doesn't feel as overwhelming.
Really good advice. So you live in a place like New York, where I feel like and I think I'm sure you've seen firsthand, a lot of people our age in their 20s, early 30s hit a point where they feel like life is kind of tough to navigate. They feel like they're behind or sort of have this imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
How would you advise people to navigate through that or sort of overcome it?
Mm. This also comes up a lot in the work that I do. I usually try to start with, it's helpful to get a sense of like, if you notice that you're feeling stressed or feeling like you're behind or feeling like things are overwhelming, getting a sense of like, what are the expectations that you're holding yourself to? Did you create those expectations? Did society create those expectations? Did your family create those expectations? Just trying to get a sense of like, where does that come from? Does that expectation align with how you would like to live your life, or how you see yourself, or what your goals are, or what your values are? And if you are noticing that that comes up in a situation, what would it take to, if you notice it, to take a step back and notice like, oh, okay, like, is that in my voice or is that somebody else's idea of like what I should be doing, and how important is that to me, and what do I want to be able to do instead? And obviously this takes a lot of time to practice, because you have to sort of unlearn a lot of what any of the like societal expectations are, or like maybe what your family values or what they had expected of you, or whatever else, cultural expectations, gendered expectations, how all of that plays in. But the first step is just having to notice whether or not that's something that is important to you, or if that's important to somebody else, and who that person is, and having to name it first.
What inspired you to get involved with this kind of work?
Mm. I have always just been fascinated by people. I loved to read as a kid. And my favorite thing about reading was like getting to like really picture characters and like understand their motives of why they were doing things and what led them there and what their relationships were. And same thing with, I did a lot of musical theater growing up, and you get to like act as another person and like really think about what their motives are and why they are acting the way they act, or why songs were written in a certain way in order to convey the like movement of a character's like choices. So that piece is part of it, but I also have always, I guess, when you see a lot of like challenging things in the world and you want to feel like, what can I do to help? This felt like a tangible way of doing it. So that way I would have like more of an understanding of why certain things happen, or how our brain works and why we do certain things, but then also how to be able to support people as they navigate that. And I really love getting to engage with that every day. It feels like you get to just be in touch with humanity every single day and all of these very like common human experiences every single day. And it's always interesting. I'm always curious about every single person that I work with. So just have a curiosity for people and enjoy getting to support them in all of the really hard things, but also celebrating all of the like really lovely things in terms of the progress that they make over time in therapy too.
See, because a lot has happened in the world since you've begun. I'd love to sort of see emotionally what you've seen change in people since the time you started to now.
Good question. The pandemic occurred, and I think just about everybody that I worked with, and people in our personal lives too, like everybody experienced a significant amount of stress during the pandemic. For some people, it gave folks an opportunity to almost like reset and really think about what was meaningful to them and what would be a life that was meaningful, because you could see how quickly things could fall apart. But for other people, it was a really, really hard, incredibly tough time, and hard as a therapist to like engage with that every day. But it's was also meaningful to know that like I at least got to provide people a space to be able to talk about that when we were all going through it at the same time. But I'd say that's probably the most challenging part of being a therapist these days, is just how you navigate the current events and everything that sort of happens around the lens of just being with people in their mental health, and how that everyday events are going to impact your mental health as well.
It's very interesting. And I'd love to sort of hear your input on how someone can find someone like you, or just help in general.
It's I think it's at times it seems like it's easier and simultaneously harder to get mental health care. First, it depends on whether or not you have insurance. So if you have insurance, usually going on to Google, going on to Psychology Today is usually a good place to start. You put in whatever your insurance is, and then that will send you, and your zip code, and that will send you like a whole list of therapists that are under your zip code and with your insurance. And you can sort of go through and like read people's profiles and see, you can even customize it based on like, I want a therapist that specializes in depression if you're feeling down. And then you just contact those people, and the hope is that they have an opening and that they take your insurance. And if they don't, it's always good to ask, like, can you send me a referral to someplace else, or can you point me in the right direction? It's, if you don't have insurance, or you have like Medicare, Medicaid, Going to some place like a community mental health center is great because they provide, and this is even for people who are uninsured as well, they provide low cost services. They're willing to usually do sliding scale, which essentially means that, like, based on what your income level, they can try to give you a range of how much the cost would be depending on what you feel like is most affordable for you. So that's also a great option as well. And now that there's a lot of telehealth options, which is great for some folks. That way you don't have to like get into a car, factor in your commute time if you're taking a train, and can see a therapist from the comfort of your home if that's preferred. But also, if you're not comfortable doing therapy from your home, you can also find a therapist that has in-office availability too. But I'd say the biggest thing is to stick with it, because it can sometimes take some time to be able to even find somebody with availability, but then to find the person who's the right fit for you, because not everybody's going to feel like the right fit, and every therapist is a little bit different. So stick with it until you find somebody who's the right fit, because it takes some time at first.
So I'd love to hear where people see themselves in 5 to 10 years.
Let's see. Ironically, I think about this a lot because you get through your 20s, and now I'm in my 30s, and my 20s were very well planned out. I knew exactly what was going to happen. And then I hit my 30s and I don't really know what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. But I'm also trying to get okay with that. But if I were to think about, like, ideally where I would want to be is still providing therapy, hopefully still traveling, hopefully reading a lot of books, getting to spend a lot of time with my husband and my friends and my family. And I don't know where I'll be living, because maybe by then I'll want to own a home, and you can't really do that in New York City. But as long as I am with my community and doing something that is fulfilling and spending time with the people I love, then that sounds good to me in 5 to 10 years.
I think that's a great place to end. Ivy, thank you so much for joining us today. I learned so much just from this conversation, and for everyone watching, tune in next time.